Let's turn our attention now to the debate around nuclear energy. And joining me now is the former Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation CEO, Dr. Paterson. Thanks so much for your time. I note that you've written to the Prime Minister, Paterson. You're warning of a potential blackout horror this summer. What needs to be done?
We've got a fundamental problem with our electricity supply, which is going to get worse. What we're seeing is that intermittent renewables, which can only ever achieve 40% if it's wind and the sun goes down at night, can never provide 100% reliable electricity. And yet that is the plan. And the reason that I've written to the Prime Minister from the perspective of looking at the grid of the future and looking at the plans that are published and reading the detail of the AEMO plans is I cannot see, as an engineer, how we will achieve that goal. But we had a warning last week, and we've got a warning this week that the reliability of our electrons in the short term is also being prejudiced because we do not seem to understand that the always on, always available electricity underpins everything else. In fact, I think the current planners have come to believe their own narrative, and they're not subjecting it to independent review and scrutiny. This is deeply worrying. And I felt it was my duty to bring it to the attention of the Prime Minister and to seek to engage him from the point of view of engineering, facts, and a reasonable set of scenarios for the future.
So what needs to be done then, in your view, in the short term to avoid what you describe as a blackout horror?
I think the most important thing that we need to do in the very short term is for a separate group to the AEMO management to work directly with their planners to establish a new baseline for the very short term. We need to get people in a room who can ask questions about what it means to be operating the grid reliably all the time. My big concern is that it's very much a scenario-based planning. The specific strategic objective of the CEO of AEMO is to achieve 100% intermittent penetration of renewables in the grid as soon as he possibly can. The CEO of the person keeping our lights on cannot have that as his strategic objective. So we need to have the strategic objective is affordable, always on, low-cost electricity for the people of Australia and a decarbonisation of the grid over the longer term. We've lost the plot because we're trying to pursue renewables, not low-carbon energy, and we're doing it in a way that compromises the fundamental integrity of the electricity grid. I believe it's incumbent on the Prime Minister.
You've called for a lift on the ban on nuclear. What do you say to the argument, and you would have heard this many times, that it's too costly and will take too long?
Well, I think it's really important to recognise that the cost of nuclear plants is high because they are very highly integrated plants, and when you switch them on, they provide reliable, effective electricity. But you know, it's been argued that it takes too long. In Finland, they have a plant now, a new nuclear plant. It was expensive and it did take too long. But what people forget is that when they switched it on, the cost of electricity dropped by 2/3. So we're focusing on the input side of the equation, but in fact, the cost in the pocket of the consumer is always lowest when you have reliable nuclear electrons. This is true in France versus Germany. It's true in Sweden versus Denmark, for example. There are many examples that are already available to the public and to politicians and to the planners to look at the effect of nuclear in a grid. Certainly it's expensive to build a plant, but it's a great outcome and it's good for consumers and it's good for the planet.
So how long would it take, in your expert view, from lifting the ban to getting a nuclear power plant in place, whether it be one of the small modular ones or a larger, more traditional approach?
My view is, with a sound regulatory baseline and commitment from state and territory governments as well as the federal government, we could, with a focused plan, build a small modular reactor facility on an existing coal plant, for example, within 10 years, And the larger plants, I think, would take maybe 12 years. That's what they achieved in the United Arab Emirates. The key thing is the state and federal governments have to work together, and the regulator has to be rational. By that I mean that the regulator should give credit to the regulation that is done in other countries, and that if a plant has been approved by another regulator, we do this with aeroplanes all the time, it's allowed to also be easily regulated in Australia.
Yeah. Former CEO of the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, Dr. Adi Paterson. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good to be here.